14 Bannerman Road is where Sarah Jane Smith lives.
And 14 Bannerman Road is the name of my podcast about it. This time, The Lost Boy Parts 1 and 2, both written by Phil Ford, the writer of Episode 2, Eye of the Gorgon, and directed by Charles Martin, with Part 1 first broadcast on the 12th of November 2007, and Part 2 first broadcast on the 19th of November 2007. It is the finale of Series 1, so naturally it begins with a cold open, as I believe all of them have done. But this one is a bit of like a fake-out monologue, as we reveal that Maria is recounting the story of the Celine to her dad, Alan. So you think she's just saying it, no context. Then we get the context pretty much immediately. She mentions Mr. Smith hacking the news so that Alan was none the wiser. And I'd like to know more about the mechanics of the news falsification. I really would, because, surely the people in charge of the newspaper know what stories are going out, right? I don't know. That's very TV, gloss over that. Mr. Smith hacked it and it's fine, and you move on. Alan says, which branch of PC World did Mr. Smith come from? Which it's like a cheap joke, but I'll let it slide because it does actually serve the purpose of setting up a little bit of uncertainty about Mr. Smith's origin. We're even seeing there's so many flashbacks in this episode. We see flashbacks to the episodes that get mentioned as Maria goes through more episodes and mentions Gorgons and whatever, and she lets Alan know that Gorgon actually turned into stone for a bit, and he is very overwhelmed by this. He's worried for Maria, and he's just trying to get everything straight in his head. There's a brief mention of Sarah Jane's past with the Doctor, just about, one line. And Alan and Maria agree that they won't tell Chrissy because she won't believe it. But she saw an alien last episode, though. She might believe it, mightn't she, if you saw an alien last episode? And so Alan comes to the conclusion that all of this is just way too dangerous, and that they're going to move. They're going to sell the house, they'll put it on the market first thing in the morning, and they're going to move. Roll titles. So Maria runs over the road to Sarah Jane's to try and get her to convince Alan that they should stay. But Sarah doesn't really know what she'd say because she thinks that, wanting to protect your kid is very reasonable. It is a dangerous thing. Alan follows Maria over, and Maria gives him a bit of a speech. And it says that, it's dangerous here, sure, with aliens and stuff. Wherever we go, there's still danger in life. This is a wonderful thing that shouldn't be shied away from. And she's backed up a bit by Sarah Jane, and Alan appears to change his mind, which is a bit quick, a bit of a quick decision. But I don't blame him, because, I don't blame him for making snap decisions, because this is, I think, a lot harder to come to terms with as an adult rather than just a kid who's seen an alien. It's like, wow, life is amazing. You're an adult who is set in their ways and thinks they know what the world is like, who has just been told that you've been turned to stone by a Gorgon. I understand wanting to, run away from it all at first, but it makes us wonder what the point of setting up that issue was if you're going to knock it down immediately after the titles roll. So they all stand there because they got a telescope out. So Sarah Jane, Luke, Alan, and Maria all stand there and watch a maybe meteor shower. They say it's something, but I didn't write down what they called it. But it might be a meteor shower. It might be alien ships flying by. Cut to a police press report type thing, with two parents saying that their kid has gone missing. Sarah Jane, so this is in the morning, Luke's sort of lying out on the sofa. Sarah Jane comes in slightly annoyed that Luke has the TV on playing the report, but he isn't paying any attention to it because he's reading. She complains about the waste of electricity, both for the climate and for her electricity bill, which is quite sweet. Cut to Maria and Alan watching the same report, and the revelation that the boy who has gone missing is Luke, but they call him Ashley. So Sarah Jane and Luke go up to the attic. Mr. Smith, I need you more than ever. There's still time for a fanfare though. Still time for him to come out and go do 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 do. You know how it goes. Mrs. Smith says that he should scan Luke, and Luke objects to this, saying that he knows that the Bane made him. He knows he's not this human couple's child. We get more flashbacks of all the stuff in the Bane. It's nothing new. It's all just clips from episodes that we've seen before with a filter over them. But Sarah Jane sort of says, "Well, look, just to be sure, let's get you scanned anyway." So Mrs. Smith scans him and reveals Luke and Ashley Stafford are the same person. So it seems that Ashley Stafford was kidnapped by the Bane rather than made. And but Luke doesn't have a belly button. And Mrs. Smith offers up the explanation that they removed his navel surgically because the Bane are born from eggs and they find navels crude and offensive. Which is a weird explanation, but it's the sort of explanation that you would have in a TV show that comes up with the first story and then it comes up with stories later down the line and tries to tie them back in. So fair enough. And Luke is upset by this because all he's ever known is Sarah Jane being his mum. But Mrs. Smith says that there's a 4 billion to 1 chance that it's a mismatch. So they basically go, okay, well, this is true. You are officially Ashley Stafford, and that's something you got to come to terms with. And maybe this is me not understanding chance. Maybe this is why I didn't do well in statistics at school. But a 4 billion to 1 chance. There's a chance. It's a tiny, minuscule, tiny chance. 3,999,999,999 times it's gonna be the truth. But there's that one where it could be a mismatch, isn't there? It's not impossible. But Chrissy's come over and she's being all smug to Maria and Ellen that she knew that there was something weird about Sarah Jane all along. She reveals that she's called the police on Sarah Jane. And Maria and Ellen are worried by this because, they think, well, Maria's now told Ellen all about the Bane and about what happened, and they're thinking, well, Sarah Jane, we saw her saving the world and stuff. She's not one to kidnap boys. So they're very worried, but there's not a lot that they can really do. They can't really tell Chrissy. So the police turn up at 13 Bannerman Road, and Sarah Jane very resignedly lets them in and comforts Luke, saying, what's going to happen? I'll probably get taken down the station, and you're gonna be reunited with your parents, who love you. And Luke wonders why he can't remember them. But I've just realised that in that first episode, episode 0, the Bane do have a thing that can erase memories. They use it on Kelsey. So, why can't you remember your parents, Luke? They've just erased you. Blank slate for them to put all the mind juice of all the other kids into. And I start thinking that there can't be a huge amount of time then between episode 0 and this episode. Because, the Staffords, they'd be looking for their son from day one. And you think, why is it taking them so long to come forward? But Sarah Jane is entirely convinced that Luke is now Ashley. She thinks, yeah, okay. The sort of sequence of events is Ashley Stafford is kidnapped from his home by the Bane. They wipe him clean. he escapes from the factory, he comes and lives with me as Luke. And so she's, very sad about giving him up, but she's accepted that she has to do so. And she says that his parents have spent months searching for him. Months? Months? I thought there can't be very. How months? Is this what happens when a child goes missing? You don't put it on the news for months. Is that really? Okay, sure. It's been months since Ashley Stafford has gone missing. Um, and she mentions the Bane actually, which is presumably the policeman. She's like, "Can you give me a minute just to chat with Luke?" And the policeman just sort of stands in the hallway outside. But presumably within earshot of this policeman, she is mentioning the Bane. But that's what they like to do in the show. Clyde's come out by this point, with Maria, Alan, and Chrissy, who's standing on the side of the other side of the road, just seeing what's going on. The parents turn up, the Staffords. You think that this would be done in private, because Luke comes out and he says he can't remember the Staffords. He doesn't remember his supposed parents, which causes the mum to try and attack Sarah Jane. This is why you'd think it would be done in private. I'm unsure if the mum calls Sarah Jane a witch or a wench, but the police break it up. Sarah Jane is arrested, which distresses Maria quite a lot. Alan's trying to comfort her. Chrissy could not give a monkey's about Maria. She is just fully absorbed in, oh, I was right. Sarah Jane kidnaps kids. Which even if we're to accept the story that the Bane kidnapped Luke, she just took him in. She didn't kidnap him. She just thought there's a child with no parents who's got amnesia and I need to look after him. It was done out of the goodness of her own heart. But the scene of just Sarah Jane being driven away in a police car, Luke, Clyde, Maria, Alan. No, well, Luke's taken off with his parents, but Clyde, Maria, Alan, Chrissy standing there, just watching them drive off. It's so well done because it's obviously like all wrong. Like this can't be true. Luke can't be like written out for the show like this as just you were Ashley Stafford. But there's no real reason for it not to be true. It's plausible enough. And you think, oh, okay, this is. You start thinking, well, what? It makes you think. It makes you wonder about the mystery and wonder quite how the plot's going to play out because it's not obvious. Like with Kudak, when Kudak is immediately stealing children, and you see them getting beamed up from before the credits even roll. You think, okay, I know what this is about. There's a bit of a twist that he doesn't know that the war is over and whatever, but you know what's going to happen. With this, you have no idea where it's going. Luke is just driven off. Sarah Jane's arrested, but pretty much immediately, Sarah Jane is let go by the police, thanks to having some powerful friends. The chief inspector says he's reading through a file on Sarah Jane, and I think it has unit sort of references in it. So, the powerful friends are implied to be unit. And the chief inspector says he smells a cover up. So unit are basically going to make the story go away, and they're not going to, plaster Sarah Jane's face all over the news because they're friends. They keep in touch. Sarah Jane and unit. They know that she needs to stay relatively undercover, and they probably know. Well, I don't know what they'd know at this point because presumably they'd also think that the Bane kidnapped Luke and Sarah Jane just took him in. So she is innocent, really. She doesn't deserve to be arrested, but of course the police and all that think that she just goes around kidnapping kids. And Unit says, no, look, we'll take over from here. There's something, stop interfering, the police. Let Sarah Jane go, which is obviously, of course, convenient for the Sarah Jane adventures to continue. Or we have to see Sarah Jane escaping prison and then going on the run, which would make a very different Sarah Jane adventures. The policeman isn't happy that this is all going to be covered up and that he's essentially dismissed off this case, but Sarah Jane says, well, either way, I'm free to go. And that's some power, really. That's, oh, you got friends in Unit. That's some power. Luke is taken back to the Stafford's house. They talk about football. They've got a picture of him, in his football kit and whatever. He says he doesn't like football, and they're thinking, oh, what is this Sarah Jane? What has she done to you? And if they genuinely think that she's like erased all his memories, then surely he needs to be taken to some significant therapy, right? Like they give him dinner and he's got pizza and the pizza's got peppers on it and he's picking the peppers off his pizza because he's, auditioning to be Peter Piper. I don't know, the alliteration was but apparently he used to like peppers, but now he doesn't like them anymore. And like, how do they expect to just live like this? He's essentially a new child, isn't he? Like everything that they think of him before is now all different. So like, where are the social services trying to integrate him back into normal life? Where? And I'm unsure at this point if the show is making it all weird and like on purpose, or if Phil Ford doesn't know how this sort of situation will play out, or if Phil Ford is perfectly aware of how the situation will play out and just has to write it like this because there's a lot of story to get through. And it continues. Luke goes to his room. It's full of stuff that he's not interested in, and he gets a bit sort of distressed just looking around, seeing all magazines he doesn't care for, posters, whatever. He tries to leave, only to find that he's been locked into his bedroom, and downstairs the parents switch the TV to the bright green channel. You see it, the shot is like from behind the TV, so they're just illuminated by this green light spilling out of the TV. And they say, Zylock, are you there? We've got the boy. And there's lots of, I'm going to say evil laughing, but it's not necessarily evil laughing. It's more just, there's a lot of laughing. So there we go. We knew it was all wrong. These are villainous people. So Maria goes over to Sarah Jane's house, gives her a hug, because she's come back from the police station. Sarah Jane breaks it off, and she's saying, Mrs. Smith confirmed Luke is with his real parents. It's for the best. I'm not cut out to be a parent, and children have no place in my life. And Maria's, of course, worried by this because she doesn't want to stop all the adventuring with Sarah Jane. But Sarah's just like, nope. She's now effectively broken up the gang. She's saying she's going to go it alone again. Alan should sell that house. You should move away. I wonder if she's sort of feeling a remorse for letting Maria see that alien in the first place and start this all off, because it's now obviously turned out wrong. It's turned out bad. But of course, we, the audience, know that there is something up with those parents. Sarah Jane goes up to the attic. Mr. Smith opens up with no fanfare, and Sarah Jane is slightly shocked because she didn't say the magic words. But Mrs. Smith says that Sarah Jane needs a purpose, and she's all like, "No, like not tonight." But he informs her of the Pharos Institute. It's had a breakthrough with telekinesis, and so she gets kind of drawn into it. And there's quite a lot of very mature emotion for a kid's show. And it's obviously all wibbly sci-fi stuff, like they literally just said telekinesis, and it's talking computer that's come out the wall and said this to her. But Sarah Jane is sitting here, essentially grieving the loss of her son, and now throwing herself back into work to try and push those feelings aside. Cut back to where Luke is, and or if we want to call him Ashley, but we don't because he's not actually Ashley. Oh no. But Ashley's dad, and I have to call him Ashley's dad because, as far as I'm aware, the episode doesn't give these parents names. Ashley's dad bursts into his room, and Luke asks why his door was locked. He says, well, you ran away once, so we want to prevent that. But he makes like this weird lurch towards Luke, and there's like a weird whip cracking sound almost. And he's acting really odd, because it's the morning time now. And he says, Luke's getting ready for school. He says, forget about going to school. You aren't going to see Clyde and Maria anymore. Luke wonders how he knows their names. He's like, oh, well, don't matter. He leaves. He leaves not before taking Luke's tie and sniffing it, which is just, he's acting really bizarre. Locks Luke back in his room again. The fact that this is the morning seems like, oh, we won't see what Sarah Jane got up to that night, because it seemed to be implied that Sarah Jane was going to go and, deal with the case that night. But it's the following morning now. Clyde and Maria are at school. They're discussing not working with Sarah Jane anymore. They assume that Luke has gone back to his old school in Hammersmith. I looked it up. Hammersmith to Ealing is only like 5 miles, and you can fit a few schools in 5 miles, but you think they wouldn't bother moving him for 5 miles' sake? You can still take a kid to school that's 5 miles away, right? It's not like they live in Scotland or something. Clyde mentions Kasabian and the Arctic Monkeys, and I bet CBBC thought that they were so hip at the time. As Clyde says, "Oh, I just got Luke listening to this music, and I was going to get him to actually at least pass as like slightly cool." And he's lamenting the loss of Luke in the way that he does, in his sort of brush everything off with jokes kind of way. So Maria and Clyde, they decide to hatch this plan and sneak out of school to find Luke, because apparently his address was in the papers, which seems odd. It seems very odd that in this high-profile case where somebody's gone missing, you would print the address that he's gone missing from in the papers. You'd print the area, sure, but the exact address, you'd think they'd get a lot of unwanted attention. I don't think that Phil Ford has lived a normal human life, but I mean, apologies to him, but it's just very bizarre the way that all of this plays out. And again, we know now that they are villains. It's not all as it seems, but you think they'd want to be pretending that all is as it seems. And so I have many, many questions, but it's a kids' show, and I'm going to let them slide. But to his credit, it like you can't necessarily pick out that this is a Phil Ford episode. You don't go, oh, Phil Ford's the one who writes weird things, because he wrote the Gorgon one, and it doesn't. All the episodes they feel very cohesive. They feel like Sarah Jane Adventures episodes, which I suppose is Russell T Davies tying them all together, because he's the head of the show. Even though we only got the credits so far on episode 0, he's still presumably got the final say on what happens. Maria gets caught by a teacher, but Clyde escapes. I've written that the teacher has a funny voice but good lines. Sarah Jane pulls up at the Ferris Institute, which is a big castle-looking building. It's not at all. It's just like a big building, and they've like got turrets and things. It's not an actual castle, but it's designed like that, and I wonder where they actually shot that. So she must have waited till daytime Probs had to, like, book a press thing and get in and everything. And she's given a tour by a lady who is very charismatic in a sort of nerdy kind of way, very very enthusiastic. The casting of her is spot on. She's got this just brilliant character of, I am a professor and I want to tell you all about my work. Um, she takes Sarah on this tour. Has to like use a thumbprint scanner thing. The thumbprint scanner thing is clearly a doorbell. It's like I've seen that doorbell on many a house. You ain't fooling me. Um, and Sarah Jane gets shown a guy with a headset on, and he's levitating a basketball, and he shakes wildly until there's all these sparks, and he collapses. He seems to be okay. I feel like if he died, they would be a lot more worried, but they're just like checking that he's okay. And this lady is still very enthusiastic about all the tech going on. So Sarah Jane asks who developed it, and she says, "Our child genius, Nathan Goss." Takes him to see Nathan Goss, who is standing in front of a whiteboard with equations on it to show that he's smart. You see, you can't be a child genius if you're not standing in front of a whiteboard with equations on it. He gives a big sigh and then, "I'm working." And I recognise him. Turns out Bernard from Bernard's Watch. And he's a bit he's obnoxious, right? He's saying that Sarah Jane would be wasting both of their time by getting him to explain his work. He calls the enthusiastic lady, who also isn't given a name in this as far as I'm aware, calls her an idiot for telling Sarah Jane about what's going on here. And she says that he deserves recognition for his work, and they need the funding, so maybe a little bit of press attention would be quite good, actually. Because she's previously said that they just get dismissed a lot because people think they're focusing on all like paranormal things, and telekinesis isn't real. And Sarah Jane, annoyed at how Nathan is acting, basically says that Luke was way smarter than him and also could have beat him up, which is quite funny. She says, like he'd wipe the floor with your intelligence and wipe the floor with you too. Which it's very funny that that's a line from Sarah Jane, and also very funny considering this is Luke, and Luke could probably not really wipe the floor with anybody. So by this point, Clyde has turned up at Ashley's house, and sees the mum, who basically tells him to get lost, and says, look, you want proof we're his real parents? Here's a picture of him with us on his birthday. We got him a skateboard." And Clyde says, "Oh yeah, was he good at skateboarding?" And she says, "Yeah, he was stellar," or something like that. And so Clyde is basically turned away, photograph in hand, because the mum said, "Look, if this Sarah Jane has sent you, take this, show her once and for all, we're the real parents." Upstairs, Luke is banging on the window trying to get Clyde's attention and failing. And as Luke frantically looks around his room, they play like sound effects of arrows being fired, which is really odd. Like the weird whip cracky sound effect when the dad was in there, it was like, okay, he's acting odd, I get it. But I guess it's just to emphasize how frantic he is. It's just like pachoo, pachoo, pachoo. It's very weird. So Clyde phones up Maria, who's, been caught in her French lesson, so she asks to go to the Louvre. She takes the call. And Clyde thinks it's very suspicious the way this mum was acting, because Luke, as we know from the Trickster episode, is bad at skateboarding. And Clyde says, "Well, yeah, but they erased his memory. Maybe he used to be good at skateboarding." And Clyde's like, "Yeah, but you'd think maybe he'd retain the instinct." I'm not sure if he'd retain the instinct, but for the purposes of the plot, maybe it's a bit suspicious that he wouldn't retain the instinct. And he says, "Hey, look, she's given me this photo, but photos can be faked. So I'm going to take this to Sarah Jane, I'm going to see what she thinks. I'm very surprised that the school isn't on the lookout for him. It seems to be a very lax school, that he's managed to, be out long enough to go walk like 5 miles. Which is going to take a couple of hours at least, right? I mean, apparently it doesn't take that long because it takes. Because when Maria gets caught, she says she's got to be in the French lesson, and then she's still in this French lesson when she takes the call. But it is nice to see Clyde and Maria at school again, though. And it just cements that this is actually part of their lives. And it wasn't just like a one-off thing for, we can do a story set at school. Back at the Stafford's house, Luke has managed to pick the lock to his room with a ruler, proving that he is Houdini. You cannot lock Luke up. 3 times now in this series, he has been locked up somewhere and has managed to get his way out. If you want to lock him up, you need to lock him up like in a complete void where there's no objects to his disposal. Because he's managed to like unscrew a lock with a trowel. He's managed to get a thing out of a vest and unhook a thing. He's got a ruler now and he's managed to pick a lock. Like one of the kid's brains he absorbed when he was being made is going to be like grow up to be a professional escapologist. But downstairs in this house, enter Nathan, the obnoxious kid from the Farris Institute. He's come to this house now. Oh, look, it all ties in. And he's saying to the parents that we have a problem. Back home, at 13 Bannerman Road, Mr. Smith is bringing up some info on Nathan while Sarah Jane is reading up about the Farris Institute. Apparently, he got 11 A-star GCSEs at age 7, and Sarah Jane calls him an obnoxious brat, which is fair. It's perfectly fair. That's his character. He's a very obnoxious brat. And they're chatting about how this telekinetic headset could actually be pretty dangerous. If people are going around lifting up things with their mind, it could, depending on how far it goes, it could be a weapon. It could be a significant threat to the world. So, Mr. Smith says, well, it would be, what would be great? What would be great? If I had one right here that I could scan and find out more about. And Sarah Jane goes, oh, you're not asking me to steal one, are you? And he says, well, it would be helpful. It would be beneficial. Simultaneously, Nathan is flipping his lid at the parents, who are saying that, okay, Sarah Jane has come to the Institute, sure. But she probably hasn't connected the dots between us and the Institute yet. And look, we have Luke locked in his room upstairs, and the Zylox said it's going to take care of Sarah Jane, and the plan is proceeding as normal, and they hear Luke creaking about upstairs, and as he tries to run out the door, they grab him, they haul him into the living room, and the dad goes, oh, these new flesh suits, they handle the gas exchange better, but they're a bit tight, and oh my god, he's a Slovene. And they show him peeling the skin off now, because they used to just sort of show the zip and then the light, and then you'd like cut to the skin falling on the floor. But they show him actually peeling the skin off. So now he's peeling it off over a CGI Slovene head, which looks so weird. It's so bouncy. It's it's like bobbing about on the neck. The mum is a Slovene too, and I gotta say, I love this. Because before they acted incredibly camp, they were farting all the time, they were overweight people, you could spot them a mile off. But now they go, oh, we've got new flesh suits, they handle the gas exchange better, we're not farting all the time, we can, take the form of anyone we want. They are so much creepier now. They can be anyone. And they're playing up to this because they're not, really camp anymore. And as much as I love a camp Slovene, I like the sinisterness. I like that's a twist. And I remember from watching this when I was 7, the reveal that, oh, this is a Slovene episode. So it didn't come as a big surprise to me. But it's still a great reveal. And I remember, probably as a 7-year-old, I can imagine that I was like, oh, hello, that's a good one. The mum says, with this tech, I can eat all I want and still be a size 8, which is a bit of a line, isn't it? It's a little bit, but, you know, it dampens the whole reveal a little bit, but, you know, just moving on from that. The baby Slovene, Nathan, because he's the baby Slovene, he reveals that he is the same one from that original Slovene episode, and now he wants revenge because his dad died. And he's revealing that he's the same one, but he is being voiced by this new Nathan kid. So it's a bit weird. You'd think when they did the reveal they'd get the old kid in to keep the voice the same if you're doing the same character. But sure, we will accept that he is the same one. And there's been like a longer period of time between the episodes, obviously, when they were broadcast and how I've been watching them. So fair enough. We get sort of like a 3-level zoom in on Luke, sort of like dun 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 as it zooms into his face. We've had a zoom before in this episode, but no Dutch angles. No Dutch angles. I mean, we've had Dutch angles in every episode. How can you break the streak? That's disappointing. We cut to Clyde, who has now run all the way back to 13 Bannerman Road, just as Sarah Jane is driving off. And I like that it does seem to take people a little while to like traverse places by foot in this program. Like there was a thing when they were walking to the place where the Gorgons are, and it's not just they don't just go from one scene to the next. There are scenes in between, and they show that time has passed because time does move quite quickly in these episodes. Like we've covered about two days now, and we're 20-something minutes in. So Clyde gets up to 13 Bannerman Road. He finds Sarah Jane's spare key under a flower pot, lets himself in. That's such a TV thing, and I feel like I've only ever seen people do it on TV, so I would never leave a spare key under a flower pot because everybody knows because they've seen it on TV. Did anybody ever used to do that at some point? Leave a spare key under a flower pot? That's the first place somebody wants to break in would look. Anyway, he's found this key, he lets himself in, he goes into the attic, he does the Mrs. Smith, I need you. Mrs. Smith comes out to no fanfare. Ooh. And Clyde shows Mrs. Smith the photo. And he says, look, can you tell if this photo is fake? And Mrs. Smith says, it is fake. Because I faked it. Because Mr. Smith is the Zylock. Mr. Smith is the Psylocke that that the Slovene were communicating with. And I think to myself, have they mentioned before in the series as what you thought at the time a throwaway line? Have they mentioned that he was a Zylock crystal before? Because if they have, then that is both A, smart because you think it'd be a throwaway line, B, risky because all the people who watch this are nerds and they like to pick up on throwaway lines. But if they haven't revealed his species before, and I just read it somewhere, then it's quite a nice reveal, isn't it? You think Mr. Smith, we've trusted him all along, and now he's this mole. You know, he's been working against us the entire time. And Clyde gets straight up just absorbed into Mr. Smith with a beam. Mr. Smith, he just fires out a beam, shoop, and Clyde is absorbed. Evil laugh, roll credits, end of part 1. Now the credits call the parents Jay and Heidi, which is funny because in the book of this episode written by Phil Ford, they're given completely different names, and I can't remember what they were. I think it was something beginning with M and June rather than Jay and Heidi, but the credits say Jay and Heidi, so I'm going to call them Jay and Heidi. Also, the enthusiastic lady is Professor Rivers. And so before we start part 2, a few things, right? First thing, in Warriors of Kodlak, I asked if they would ever reference an episode without aliens, right? Just as a way of sort of just making the aliens seem a bit less incredibly frequent. And in Whatever Happened to Sarah Jane, they actually referenced another off-screen thing that we never got to see, but with aliens, with even more aliens, because that was the Veron Soothsayer. But in this episode, the explicit mention of the parents, the parents in inverted commas, the Slovene, doing months of searching for Luke, it then makes it seem like that there are gaps in between these episodes that we see when nothing happens, but we just don't see it because nothing happens. But still, it's a lot of aliens for a few months. And also, I'm just thinking of this just now, the start of this episode was Maria telling Alan about all the things that have happened. Alan wanted them answers pretty much immediately after the Trickster episode, so not a lot of time must have passed in between those two episodes. I also mentioned this episode being sort of more mature. It's still Sarah Jane, it's still kids show, it's still Slovene who want to take over the world, blah blah blah. But there seemed to be this sort of change in the series, kind of during Warriors of Kutlak, to a slightly more mature thing. Because Kutlak, he talked about war. Kids died in that war. This show has killed children. And then the Trickster with, death and having to accept that. And now we've got this episode. I mean, even the Gorgons had sort of Alzheimer's. But the first Slovene and Bane episodes were a lot more camp. And I like it because it's not dark or moody, but it's mature themes that kids can handle because they're not idiots, but they are the sort of mature themes that stick with you, and then a part of the reason why I come back to this show now and want to make a podcast about it, because it isn't just a kids show that has no substance to it. It's got a lot that I want to revisit and talk about. And then my final point 3, is that with the return of the Slovene, I started thinking that, well, Mrs. Wormwood in the Bane one is left open to a return, and spoiler alert, she will return. Kutlak is left open to a return, but his story is kind of a lot more wrapped up, and he doesn't make a return. The Gorgons won't make a return, and they're not set up for it. But the Trickster will, and now the Slovene have within this same series, and there's a lot of reuse in this show. But I'm fine with it because the episodes are still pretty strong, and it seems fine. And it kind of almost addresses point 1 when there are lots of aliens and they pop up very frequently, but it's actually less of a frequent thing if it's the same aliens making return visits. So now moving on to part 2, we start off and it's nighttime. Sarah Jane is outside the Faros Institute. She sonic lipsticks her way in, which is nice. We haven't seen the sonic lipstick in a little while. We didn't see it at all in part 1. So she sonic lipsticks her way in. It's just full on like heist. There's like music going. She's avoiding a security guard. And she picks up the headset that she's come to steal, escapes the building, but an alarm goes off. The entire grounds lights up with lasers. There's a sort of speaker saying that any attempt to escape may result in death, which is a bit much, but she just sonics the lasers. Perfectly fine, no threat there. But then she's pursued by a dude on a motorbike who has to sort of go over a bump and do a jump because drama. And Sarah Jane sonics the motorbike, and he crashes, and he's just lying on the floor. And she sort of makes a quip about it and everything, but he groans so that we know he's alive. Very important that Sarah Jane didn't just kill a man. Maria is leaving messages for Clyde. Clyde's like answer machine message, his voicemail thing. It's very like, oh, I bet you're calling me up because you want to date me, whatever. It's very Clyde. But but he's nowhere to be found, obviously, because Mr. Smith has absorbed him. And we see that the inside of Mr. Smith, where you get sent when you're absorbed by this computer, is basically a black void with big panels of like red matrix-like numbers and letters, just sort of all scrolling past and everything. And it's all, the camera work is all like, let's spin around and make things slightly transparent and overlap and put a load of bleepy bloopy noises in to try and disguise the fact that we are just in a room. Maria gets a call from Clyde's mum, wondering where he is, and she says, well, I don't know, I haven't seen him, but of course I'll call you back if I do. She walks through the lounge and then ends the call, spins round, flumps down into a chair, perfectly frames Alan in the background, who she starts talking to. And that shot is just so nice. That is top marks for the direction on that shot. That is Charles Martin. Brilliant. Brilliant shot. Just walk around, flump, bam, Alan's in the background, continue on the conversation. Beautifully done. During this conversation, Alan calls the Bane the Bean, because you see he's new and he has to get things wrong, you see, because he's new and it's all new to him and he can't recall the fact that they're called the Bane, so he has to call them the Bean. But he says, hey, look, I'm a part of this now. I may be new, but I'm a part of this now. I'll go looking with you, Maria. I'll go looking for Clyde. Go team. So they go to the Stafford's house. Alan judges the Stafford's house, and he says, if I was going to take over the world, I'd take over a palace rather than this place. This is rude. And Maria says, well, hey, look, the Staffords aren't in. So if they aren't in, let's break him round the back. So they do. They go in through like a conservatory door or something. They're looking through this conservatory. Alan opens a cupboardy type thing and finds hanging up the skin suit, the dad's skin suit. He freaks out, which you would if you just discovered the skin of a man hanging up. And it's horrible. It's a kid show and it's so horrible. It's a skinned man. This show is perfectly fine with people dying. It's even more fine with them being hollowed out and but his immediate thought is that they're cannibals. But then Maria delivers the line, they're not cannibals. They're Slovene, which would have been a really nice reveal. I know they had to do the reveal in part 1 and all that, but you could have had Mr. Smith in part 1 and the Slovene in part 2, couldn't you? That's a really nice reveal, but... And then we didn't need to have the budget for the weird bouncy CGI Slovene head. But anyway, that's not how it played out. What next plays out is that Luke is tied up in a van. He's being transported. The kid Slovene is in charge. Withy's got his skin back on. Luke doesn't know what a Zylock is, so maybe they haven't mentioned it before. You'd think if Luke was there, he'd remember it. That's his thing. His thing is memory. So we see more Clyde. Mr. Smith has a big echoey voice now, sort of speaking from the inside of him, which is I quite like that voice actually. It's the same man. It's just a nicer effect on it. And he says that what he's doing isn't bad. It's just fulfilling his purpose. And he sort of casually mentions, in passing, that everybody's going to die in a few hours. Clyde, from the inside of Mr. Smith, can see Sarah Jane return with this headset. He's banging on sort of the screen, trying to warn her. She's none the wiser. Alan and Maria, having found not much more than the skin suit, return home. They find Chrissy at home. Apparently, they forgot to lock the door, which is another thing that people like to do in this show. Lock your doors, people. At least they mention it and make it a whole thing, which is how Chrissy got in. But lock your doors, people. If you're going out, is that not priority number 1? Chrissy says that Alan's PC is making a weird noise. So he says, "Hey, all right, Maria, you go down to the shops while I sort out this PC." Um, so Maria just, of course, goes straight over to 13 Bannerman Road, and cocky as anything, because Sarah Jane is like, "Hey, like I said, I broke up the gang. I don't want you here." Cocky as anything, she just struts in. They're not Luke's parents. They're Sabine. Walks past the camera, which then zooms into Sarah Jane's shocked expression. Priceless. Um, so Luke and all the Slovene in the van, they pull up to the Ferris Institute. The kid Slovene, Nathan, he puts ear defenders on Luke's head. There's a security guard that says, "Oh, hello, Nathan. What are you doing here on Saturday?" And Nathan plays a noise, very high-pitched noise that just completely knocks him out. A noise that doesn't seem to affect Sabine, but obviously would have affected Luke. So that's why they put the ear defenders on him. Back at Maria's house, Chrissy's saying, "I can't hang about, actually." And she leaves pretty much as Alan is sent a wibbly message through his PC from Clyde, who's communicating from within Mr. Smith. Alan asks where he is, and he types that there's no time and that you just must warn Sarah Jane. And I feel like when asked where you were, you could have said inside Mr. Smith. That wouldn't take that long to type. He's sort of like doing like mind typing, like he's imagining a keyboard and just moving his fingers and it's making the stuff pop up. And so Sarah Jane and Maria have gone up into the attic now, none the wiser that Mr. Smith is evil. They say, "Mr. Smith, we need you." And we're getting a lot of variations on "Mr. Smith, I need you" in this episode, which I quite like. No fanfare. And Clyde types "Mr. Smith gone bad." So at least there's like that context there. At least Alan is a bit clued in on what's going on. Sarah Jane and Maria ask about Slovene, and he asks, "Oh, why are you asking about Slovene?" And Maria says, "Well, Mr. Smith, you got it wrong. They aren't Luke's parents." And then he does his big reveal to them with an evil laugh. And we get a shot sort of through his red tinted, wibbly numbered computer eyes or whatever, just a shot from his perspective. As Alan is running over the road, desperately trying to warn them. And a gun type thing comes out of Mr. Smith and starts firing at Sarah Jane, Maria, and Alan. So they all flee back to Maria's house. And Mr. Smith then knows that Clyde contacted Alan. So he says, he reiterates the point that he's not bad, he's just fulfilling his purpose, and he knocks Clyde out. And Sarah Jane then explains that 18 months ago she was researching some volcanoes, and a friend sent her a crystal from Krakatoa, and when she was sort of looking at it, she saw it communicating with her laptop, and she found out that it was a memory cell from a crashed ship from millions of years ago, and it's got extreme computing power, and it told her that it could help her protect the Earth, and then designed all this Mr. Smith casing itself, which she somehow got built, so we sort of gloss over that. And Sarah Jane, Allen, and Maria come to the conclusion that the Slovene want Luke, and they've kidnapped him because his mind is, incredible and could produce a lot of telekinetic energy, which if they're sort of harvesting this at the Ferris Institute, they could sell that off. Cut to the Ferris Institute where they're doing just that. They're harvesting Luke, but he overloads the system and gains amazing telekinetic powers, launches the dad Slovene across the room, manages to escape. Nathan Slovene, calling him Nathan Slovene, they've all got Slovene names, but I can't recall them. They're a lot like the other Slovene names were just sort of like Blon, Fell, Foch, Passamir Day. But these ones they're a lot less precise. They're sort of they mumble them a bit more and it's a bit hard to pick up on. So I'm calling the kid Nathan Slovene. He unzips his skin again, pursues Luke, Sarah Jane and co stop off to grab vinegar from the chip shop. As far as I'm aware, vinegar from chip shops a lot of the time isn't actually real vinegar, and they aren't supposed to brand it as real vinegar, but they do anyway because nobody really cares because it doesn't really matter. There's a Tom Scott video on that, but I'm unsure if chemically it would do the same job. But for the purposes of the episode, they have picked up real vinegar. That's me being very pedantic. They come into the room with the unconscious Slitheen in it that wake up and they're held at bay with the vinegar. But the kid Slitheen, unable to catch Luke, has come back in and grabs Maria. So there's a bit of a stalemate, with Sarah Jane and Alan pointing vinegar at the mum and dad Slitheen, and Nathan Slitheen has grabbed Maria. They agree to sort of, sort this out and give Maria back if they promise not to, squirt vinegar on them, and they chuck the vinegar in the bin. And they're all sort of standing there, and they twig that Mr. Smith has got a bigger plan going on, but it's kind of a little bit like, oh, okay, you've twigged that, sure, we'll go along with it. Because they're like, none of them are exactly sure what his bigger plan is yet. But by this time, I said it takes people a while to run places. Not for Luke though. He's got his super legs on. He's sprinted all the way back to 13 Bannerman Road. It is nighttime now though. He's looking for Sarah Jane. He is sort of called up to the attic by Mrs. Smith's voice. And once in the attic, Mrs. Smith remotely closes the door. Unsure how, but he does. And he is forced into putting on the headset that Sarah Jane stole, because he is shown Clyde, and Mrs. Smith says, well, hey, I'm evil, put on this headset or I will kill Clyde. At the Pharos Institute, they all see this spike in telekinetic energy once he's put the headset back on. The world starts shaking and everything. They look outside and they see the moon moving towards Earth. The moon's an egg, Did you know that? The moon's an egg. That's... Oh, that episode of Doctor Who. What an episode that was, eh? But Sarah Jane says, hey, well, Celine, look at that moon moving. You want to escape in your ship, do you? You want to escape? You want to run now that your plans all gone awry? You can't do that. The moon gravity is gonna make that impossible. So an alliance is formed between the Slitheen and Alan, Sarah Jane, and Maria. You get news reports of weather going mad. There's avalanches. There's storms. There's tidal waves. There's even fires. I'm slightly unsure how the moon coming closer to Earth is starting fires, but it is. Alan gets a call from Chrissy, absolutely freaking out, saying that she needs to be with him and Maria right now, if possible. It seems like she's about to say "I love you" before the phone line dies. I think, oh, that's the whole thing. And then, in a stunning turn of events, it's revealed that Alan, who up to this point, his computer prowess, all we've known is that he was paid to install some computers in schools. He has conveniently got himself an FBI virus. And when Sarah Jane's like, well, where did you get that from? He just says, oh, you're not the only one with contacts. Who are your contacts, Alan? The FBI. You have contacts in the FBI. You have contacts in the FBI, do you, Alan? Okay. Are we going to gloss over this? Sarah Jane uses a Slitheen teleporter to get to 30 Bannerman Road. Mr. Smith reveals his master plan is that if he were to crash the moon into the Earth, it would release all the buried Psylocke crystals underground. And he's just been biding his time, helping Sarah Jane and sort of gaining her trust until an opportunity has arisen. And he says that the universe will be better served by the Psylocke survival rather than humanity's survival, which is why he's fine with killing them, and he thinks that it's not actually a bad thing to do. Sarah Jane says that any race thinking it's better than another is evil. You tell him. You tell the weird Nazi crystal, Mr. Smith. You. It's. I mean, I fully support what Sarah Jane is saying, but when you think about it, it's a rebuke against Nazis. Mr. Smith is a Nazi. Bizarre sentence to say. Mr. Smith beams Clyde back into the room to show that he's not a Nazi. He's merciful, but he obviously believes that they're all going to die anyway. So, like, what does it matter whether Clyde is out here in the open? He's going to get squished by the moon. And Mr. Smith is aiming his gun at Sarah Jane, so she can't get close enough to him to install the virus. So she backs up to the safe on her wall and starts unlocking it behind her back. And Mr. Smith is being evil, and sort of one of the things he says is, "What life do you have alone in your attic?" And she says, "Alone," and opens the safe. Enter K9. K9. He comes out shooting at Mr. Smith, drawing his fire so Sarah Jane can get up close enough, insert the virus disc. Clyde's never met K9 before, so he is a sweet little moment. And it wipes Mr. Smith's memory, which is a nice little thematic tie. And he forgets his purpose and is convinced by Sarah Jane that his new purpose is to save the Earth before he shuts down, and then we need to find out that he will reboot and he will have latched onto that new purpose of saving the Earth. The moon is returned to its rightful place in the sky. Earth is saved. K9's got to leave as soon as possible because he's got to deal with that black hole and all the legal reasons. And the gang, they all go and stand outside 13 Bannerman Road, watching the Slovene leave in their ship. Chrissy comes out and joins them and seems perfectly fine. And we get a Sarah Jane monologue, like from that first episode 0, where she's saying, "I saw amazing things out there in space, but there's things on Earth if you know where to look." And then she ends it off with, "And in all the universe, I never expected to find a family." And that is episode and series end. And going back over it now for the podcast, reading it all out, I really, really enjoyed part 1, and I really, really enjoyed most of part 2. But I think I felt almost sort of angry at the end of watching part 2. Because, Alan, what? You're with your Deus Ex Machina virus, we need more context on that. If you're going to reveal that he's got FBI contacts, don't save that for the next series. Tell us that beforehand. And also, Chrissy, who now, like, she seems A, fine with Sarah Jane, B, she knows about aliens but doesn't. We need to sum all that up. There's no conclusion to this. And with Mr. Smith as well, his, like, other opportunities to be evil, has he done things previously that contradict that? I am not smart enough to analyse all this stuff that we've seen in my head and try and spot the inconsistencies, but it's like a potential fridge logic thing where somewhere later down the line I'm going to be lying in bed and I'm going to think, hang on a minute, that doesn't make sense, right? I hope we get some, like, a lot of this cleaned up next series. And so it is a shame. It is a shame to end like this on a not exactly quite so positive note. But all in all, it's been an absolutely cracking series that I have had a great time rewatching. And, you know, I'm glad that I'm doing this. And I think there are even better episodes to come. So I hope that you'll join me for series 2. In the meantime, bye bye.